Hello, good morning. My name is Adam. Welcome to the next episode of Tapir tutorials. This time we will cover the basics of error handling in Tapir. It's a complex subject and we'll just scratch the surface, but I think what we'll learn today will be immediately practical if you are writing Tapir applications. So let's get coding. When it comes to errors and error handling, this typically means returning some kind of HTTP status codes to the user which are appropriate for the error that occurred. So errors might be divided into expected errors. So these are errors being caused by invalid input being provided by the user. So maybe the query parameter is missing, the body cannot be parsed, or a specific header value is invalid. So these kind of expected errors, so let's say we have expected errors, these typically cause the response to have the HTTP status code between 400 and 499, so somewhere in this range. So this means that it's a client error, right? The client provided us with invalid data, and we should be ready to appropriately handle such situations. On the other hand, there are also unexpected errors, right? So something that we did not foresee. This might be a bug in our code, but it also might be that the server is temporarily overloaded and maybe there's too many requests coming in and we cannot produce a response. So in this case we return error codes in the range from 500 to 599, meaning it's a server error. So we will mostly concentrate on the first category, so on the client expected errors and how to handle them, but we will also briefly touch on the subject of unexpected errors and what happens when such errors occur. Okay, so we will be using the same base set of dependencies as before. So we have the basic Tapir dependency, so the core, we have the synchronous native server, we have the Swagger UI to expose documentation as HTML, we have JSONiter to deserialize and serialize JSON bodies, and we have the Tapir JSONiter integration. So to demonstrate how we can handle expected or client-side errors, let's say that we will have two classes. We will have a result class which should be serialized as a response in case of our logic being successful, of all the input parameters being correct and the business logic running successfully. So we will just return a number, and we will derive the JSON codec because we want to serialize this kind of response as JSON. We will derive the schema so that we can generate documentation, and in case of a client-side error, we want to return the error, serialized as JSON as well. So we will provide some description here indicating why this input that the user provided was invalid. Okay, so we got these two classes. This one we want to use in case of success, this one we want to use in case of error. So now let's describe our endpoint, which will cover both of these cases. So we start with the base endpoint value, which is an empty endpoint. It will be a get endpoint. It will correspond to the path test. It will accept a query parameter which should be parsed as a int, and it will be called input. Now as an output, in case of success, we will return a JSON body serialized from the result class. So this output describes the endpoint's output in case of success, so when everything went fine. But we can also specify error outputs. So what should be the result? What kind of data should be serialized to the HTTP response in case a client-side error has occurred? So in case something went wrong in the business logic, because probably the client data was invalid. So for that we may use the error out method. So just as with the out methods in and so on, error out accepts an output description. So this will be a JSON body corresponding to the error class. So when we call error out on an endpoint description, we obtain a modified endpoint description, right? A copy, because after invoking each of these methods, we obtain a new immutable description of an endpoint, which we can further customize. So the error out over here returns an updated endpoint description, which says that the error output of our endpoint corresponds to an error instance serialized as JSON. Okay, and finally we need to provide the business logic. So we will use the handle method. So now we are not using handle success anymore because errors might happen, and this handle must be a function. So the signature of the handle function is that it takes an int, so this corresponds to the value extracted from the request over here. It's an int, and it must return either an error or a result. So the either type is often used to represent values which might fail, so it represents either a failure or success. By convention, the failure case is on the left side of the either, and the success is represented by the right side of the either. So that's the signature of the method that we have to provide, and Scala will check at compile time that the function that we provide here actually corresponds to this signature, right? So this input parameter over here will be an int. So now we can, do some logic. So if input modulo 2 is 0, so if the number is even, then we return a successful result. Let's say we return input divided by 2. Otherwise, if it's an odd number, we return a result saying that it's an error and that's an odd number. Okay, so here of course the contract that we didn't communicate in any way to the user, so we probably should do so by describing it through some documentation, probably attached to the endpoint description as well. The contract here is that only even numbers should be provided as an input, right? So the client's error would be that we actually have provided an odd number. Okay, so I guess we can actually test it. So what I have here is I have the standard generation of Swagger endpoints, so OpenAPI documentation, and we are also starting the Netty synchronous server the same way as always. So I think we can start testing. So let's open the terminal. Let's actually try compiling this, and it did not compile because I misspelled the derives. Okay, and over here, so once again, one more error and configured. So it's a complicated name which I mistyped for the second time in the second video. Okay. Okay, awesome. We have the server running, so we can now test make some test invocations. So let's say we provide an even number, so this should be the successful result. We are using the verbose mode just to see the status code, and you can see that we obtain the value 5, so 10 divided by 2, and we have the 200 OK status code. Now if we provide an even number, we get a description that that's an odd number, right? So that's the error case, and the 400 bad request response. Okay, so I think we might also take a look at the generated documentation. So we have our test endpoint here, and we can see that we have the 200 status code corresponding to our result schema, and we have the 400 status code. That's for the query parameter. When the query parameter is invalid, and the default, which doesn't cover any of these, so also 400. We have our error case over here. So the default that's to say that if any other status code is returned other than 200 and 400, this schema should be expected. So the error, we haven't specified a specific status code, but the shape of the endpoint that we have defined is defined in the documentation as well. Okay, one more thing that I think might be interesting to see is that once we interrupt this, the compile time checking that we have here. So if, for example, we make a mistake and we return a right value here with an error, this should be nicely checked by the compiler, right? So we can see that there's an error in this line, right? We found an error here, but we expected a result, right? Because a write should be a result. So, for example, if we just return an error over here, this will be a different compile time error, right? The compiler expected an either, but got an error, right? So this is all nicely checked at compile time, that the shape and the signature of the server logic that we provide matches the description of the endpoint that we have created. So everything is nicely type safe. Okay, so these are the expected errors. Let's also take a brief look at how handling of unexpected errors looks like. So let's say that if the input modulo 3 is 0, then we throw a runtime exception. Multiples of 3 are unacceptable. Okay, so that's an exception which is thrown by the server logic. It's not visible in the signature anyway that we can, return this type of error. So it will be treated by the Tapir server as an unexpected server error, right? So it's kind of a bug in our code, right? So that's a situation which we should ideally represent in some kind of an error output, right? That the user shouldn't provide multiples of 3. Instead, we throw as kind of an assertion error. So it's a bug in the server in this case, which should be fixed. So let's see what happens when we run this code. So to actually see what the server will do, we need to add logging to our server. This can be done by, for example, by using the logback dependency, which provides an SLF4J compatible logger on the class path. It will be automatically used if it's present. So that's what happens in our case. Okay, so we've got the modified code. Let's try running it. So once again, maybe I will make this bigger. Where's the slider? Now it disappeared. Okay, anyway, I won't make this bigger then. Let's try compiling the project. Okay. We have some debug logs, so let's not worry about them. But now let's try, it should still work with 10, right? We get the proper behavior. Let's try 9. 9 is forbidden, right? What we get is an internal server error with the 500 status code. So a server error. That's what's returned to the client. We don't want to share with the client any details of what happens on the server side. So instead, all the details are logged in the server log, right? Because of security concerns, you should never return details of the server side unexpected errors to the user. And here we've got the stack trace. If you go to the root cause, you can see that we have an exception when handling this request with input 9. It took 3 milliseconds, but it threw an exception with our message, and you can see that it happened in line 32. So everything checks out nicely. Okay, so I guess that's it for the basics of error handling in Tapir. So just to do a short recap, you can specify error outputs when you describe endpoints, these error outputs can have arbitrary shape, just as normal outputs, and they are completely separate. So the endpoint's description in essence consists of three parts. It's a description of the inputs, a description of the successful outputs, and a description of the error outputs. So now we have covered all three parts. And then we have the server logic method, which must match, is the signature of the server logic method must match what we have described using these inputs and outputs, and that's all nicely verified by the compiler. The documentation is properly generated to cover all of these cases that we have covered here, and some more. As we have seen, the documentation also contained that the query parameter value might be invalid, right? Because the int parsing might fail. So that's also included in the documentation. In the query parameter failing to parse case, we would get a string message. This also can be adjusted. It's a configuration option of Tapir, which we will probably cover at a later tutorial. And in case an unexpected server error happens, we have a behavior, I guess, which we would expect. So we get a 500 response code on the client side, on the caller side, and we have the details of the error in the server logs. So thank you very much, and I hope to see you next time.